hear me now? Yay! Well, thank you everyone for being here today. And we're here for what I think will be an exciting and informative debate tonight between the incumbent Tammy Morales and the challenger Tanya Woo. So, well, clap if you like. That's awesome. The International Examiner, Real Change, and Ground Zero. They will be participating, and unfortunately, the International Examiner person couldn't make it tonight, but we do have the Real Change person and Ground Zero reporters who will also ask some questions. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Emerald. The Emerald is a BIPOC-led local news outlet, and when I say local, in many ways we're hyperlocal. We report on South Seattle and beyond, because many of our neighbors, our friends have moved further south. So we, as the Emerald, also report on things that happen further south. But the issues we talk about, or the news we talk about, also impacts the whole region. So while we're local, and you all, most of you, I hope, know about the Emerald and the work that we do and how it reflects, with authentic reflection of our community, you also know that the things we talk about impact the whole city. Now, the Emerald is a local community outlet that is not behind a paywall. So when you go to the Emerald, you don't have to worry about, after reading 5 stories or something like that, all of a sudden you're going to click and you get a pop-up that says, hey, you need to give me some money. So the fact that we're not behind a paywall means that we need your support. Because for one thing, nothing is really free, right? There are reporters who we have to pay. We have our website, everything that has to be paid for. And in the news industry right now, there are a lot of news outlets going out of business because the business model has changed. It used to be that people relied on advertisement for their business, right? We still do a little bit, but even the people behind paywalls, like the Seattle Times and New York Times, which at some point, you're going to have to pay them to read them. They're even having trouble with their revenue. So just imagine not-for-profit organizations like the Emerald. So if you want to continue to read us, we really need your support. So please think about becoming a Rainmaker, which is a recurring donation, or just one donation is just fine a year, because we really need your support. So if you go to the back table, there are some QR codes you can use to donate. And of course, you can go to our website and donate as well. Another thing I want to tell you about is T'Challaween. I don't know if you all have heard of T'Challaween or not, but there's a parade of community that takes place, and this year will be October 28th. It takes place along the Healthy Street on 18th Avenue South on Beacon Hill, and it's such a great time. My first time going to T'Challaween was last year. I had never heard of it or seen it before, and I was really amazed with all the incredible costumes and families out there dressed up together. It was just so much fun. So please think about coming out to T'Challaween, and really please think about volunteering, because in order for us to make it happen, remember, we're a community-oriented local news outlet. In order to make it happen, we need volunteers. So go to our website and sign up to volunteer for T'Challaween. Now, as far as exits, in case something happens tonight, which nothing's going to happen, but in case something does, I need to tell you there are exits on either side of me. And of course, you can go out the back. We have restrooms. There's one upstairs, and there are several restrooms downstairs. Also, if you want to ask a question, what we did is provide an opportunity, and if you don't have a card, you can raise your hand and someone can give you a card and a pencil. You have an opportunity to write the question down, and sometime during the debate, our moderator, Mike Davis, he's going to say that we're going to gather up the cards, and then Mike will go through them and ask the question. Now, our debaters are going to introduce themselves, but right now I'm getting ready to introduce Mike Davis. Mike Davis is our Voices editor, and I want to say, and he also works for KUOW as an arts and culture reporter. Now, Voices, if you don't know about Voices, Voices is one of the most important things that the Emerald does, because We want to reflect the community, and in order to do that, it can't just come from our reporters, it also has to come from you. And one of the awesome things that takes place with Voices is that if you don't consider yourself a writer, well, everyone can write. You know, even if you can't actually write, you have a voice that people can take and write it down. So if you don't consider yourself a writer, or you don't think you're a good writer, we actually have editors that can help you to make sure that it reaches the journalist standard that we want to have on our website, but we still get your voice out there. Because in order for us to reflect the community, we have to hear from the community. So Voices, I think, is like, if it's not the most important thing we do, it's definitely one of the most important things we do. So I really appreciate that Mike is our editor. So I'm getting ready to get off the stage now, and I'm turning it on over to Mike, and we're going to get started with the debate.
Thank you, Michael. Wow, so I can't see you all right now, but I'm Mike Davis. Nice to see you. And you know, that was a great introduction, Michael. I appreciate that. But I want to add one more note about the Voices section and how special it truly is. So tonight, none of the questions you're going to hear me ask are for me. They're already from y'all. We already put the call. We're going to hear the questions that come from our readers, and that's in line with the mission of the Voices section. We want to hear from all of you. And if you're out there and you have a story and you want to tell it, please reach out to me. I've had people tell me oral stories that I transcribe and then let them edit, and then I come back and edit. However you want to get us your story, we will take it and we will tell it. Now, I want to add one more thing to the housekeeping note. Can you please silence your phones for me real fast if you haven't done so already? One other note I want to make. We are going to continue to accept audience questions all night. So while candidates are giving their answers, if you have a rebuttal, a follow-up, if you feel a certain way about what you were hearing, please just write it down. Write it down and we will get to it, but we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to hear from each candidate in entirety. I am going to read the rules, and then I will bring the candidates up, and they will introduce themselves. So we are going to start tonight with a round of rapid-fire questions. All of these hard-hitting questions, the candidates will answer yes or no, and they will indicate that answer with paddles that are at the podiums. After we get through our lightning round, we're going to move on to the open questions. I will ask the question. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer the question. If you have a rebuttal or a follow-up question, each candidate, if you just lift your paddle while your fellow candidate is speaking, we will know that you want a rebuttal, and we will give you 30 seconds for that rebuttal. I am a reporter, so sometimes I might have my own rebuttals, and I will give you 30 seconds to come back on that as well. So after that round of questions, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to have some special guests come in, and they'll have a chance to ask some questions. Then we'll take one more break, and all of our audience questions that are coming in today that people are writing down, we'll then get to those. So lots of rounds of questions. At this time, can we have both of our candidates approach the podium? Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So you will each get 1 minute to introduce yourself. First person to look at.
Hi, my name is Tanya Woo. I grew up on Beacon Hill. I have a small business in the Chinatown International District, and I now live in Rainier Valley. I've seen the changes in South Seattle. I've seen what happens in neighborhoods that don't have a voice and are forced to live with bad city policy, and I'm ready to change that. I'm a community advocate. I've pushed back against the city's continued discrimination against one of the most endangered neighborhoods in America. I also know how to achieve better public safety with my group, the Chinatown International District Community Watch. We go out and provide mutual aid and patrol the neighborhood and also work with first responders. I know how to build affordable housing We as a hotel is workforce housing, and we only charge our tenants a percentage of their income so that no one is forced to pay rent they cannot afford. And so we need to get past elected leaders telling us what they're going to do and not listening to the community. So I promise to show up, work hard, and do what it takes to govern the city and uplift South Seattle together. Thank you.
Before we move on, can I please introduce Ms. Deborah? Ms. Deborah is our timekeeper. She's going to help me tonight. You have 1 minute.
What's on the timer on the panel? I can't see.
Okay, so it's 30 seconds left,
Okay,
and then 10 seconds left, and then the ding.
and then the ding. Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's roll.
Thanks so much. Good evening, everybody. I'm Tammy Morales. I am the current council member representing District 2. I am a mom with 2 kids in Seattle Public Schools. I have worked and organized in District 2 for over 20 years, and I'm also trained as a neighborhood planner. In fact, that is why I decided to run for council, because I really want to make sure that we are stopping the displacement that's happening of our Black and brown neighbors, of our Black and brown owned businesses, and to really create more healthy, resilient neighborhoods in District 2. We know that folks in the Central District, in the CID, in the South End deserve to stay rooted in community and deserve to be able to build generational wealth. That's the work I've been focusing on in my first term of office. We supported Africa Town, organizations like that are bringing Black businesses back to the CD, and doing a lot of work around anti-displacement and promoting and supporting community-led development. I'm looking forward to our conversation tonight.
Thank you so much. All right, Councilmember Morales, Candidate Woo. It's time for the lightning round. We're coming out the gate with a hard hitter, so please be ready with your yes and your no. First question is, are you planning on attending, or have you ever attended T'Challa? That's a great answer. That's a great answer. In the last month, have you attended a community event in the South End? In the last 6 months, have you attended an arts event in the South End? Do you believe that men's professional sports teams should be included in the city's admission tax? Do you believe encampment sweeps are necessary? Do you think police foot patrols would reduce crime?
Can I waffle?
Okay. Do you believe the Seattle Police Department is overfunded? Please write your comments down. We'll take them and we'll read them. Do you believe the Seattle Police Department is underfunded? Do you support closing all or part of the 3 miles of Lake Washington Boulevard in South Seattle that is currently shared by cars and bikes? And that's the strip along Lake Washington. Do you think the city of Seattle has neglected the needs of the CID? And that's the Chinatown International District for those who may not. Do you think the city of Seattle has neglected the needs of the South End in general? Do you think the police union contract should require more oversight for officers? Do you think the hiring of more police officers will directly lead to an increase in public safety? Look like you're kind of waffling, isn't it? In the last week, have you personally spent money with any local businesses in the South End? In the last week, have you eaten at any local restaurants in the South End? Gotten coffee at a local cafe in the South End? Just making sure we're connected to the South End. Okay, thank you so much. At this time, we are going to move into our general question round. So each candidate will have 30 seconds. We'll have 90 seconds. 90
That's not
seconds.
even
Thank you. This time Ms. Deborah is here. Okay. The first question I'm going to give to candidate Woo. And this is a big one. Almost everyone that wrote to us gave us something about this. So I had to condense it. So just know, y'all, these got put together. But 12th and Jackson has become a very hot topic in this race. What is your specific plan to clean up that area, and what will you do to support the businesses that are there? 90 seconds.
Yes, so my group, the Chinatown International District Community Watch, we go to 12th and Jackson twice a week to try to connect people to resources, try to offer up support to the businesses in that area and residents as well. And so right now I'm working with a group of organizations to put together a plan similar to the Third and Pike Pine plan. We thought it was inequitable that they got a plan, yet the CID 12th and Jackson did not. And so we're trying to get an assessment as well as a quote from WDC, We Deliver Care, who's been doing the outreach and engagement in the Third Avenue plan. And we had them walk with us at 12th and Jackson, and they saw very much the same people who were there in very similar situations. And so we think that having that group do some work in that area will help relieve some burden off the businesses, off residents, and also be there as ambassadors to help some at Sierra High School, who's only half a block away, as well as offer resources. A lot of people who are on 12th and Jackson are housed, and so we are seeing the effects of fentanyl, and it's really deadly. Fentanyl is a poison. It's not a drug. It's killing people. I've done Narcan and CPR on people at 12th and Jackson. It's a huge range of people from young to older adults, and we really need some sort of action there. And so I've been doing outreach in the area and have continued to do it, and now working with other organizations to put together this plan and hoping that City Council will fund it.
Thank you. Councilmember Morales, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. So part of what we have been doing for the last couple of years is to meet regularly. We met every couple of weeks with the CID Business Association, with Friends of Little Saigon, with Harborview, and the small businesses in the area. My office met with them for several months, and then we also brought in different city departments to try to understand what the city could be doing to remedy the serious issues that we have in that intersection. We met for about a year and a half, and together the neighborhood came up with a neighborhood safety plan to work with the small businesses addressing some of the issues. We also, part of the plan was to request from the city 2 street outreach workers. So REACH is one of the organizations that does that direct contact with folks who are experiencing homelessness or who are dealing with an addiction issue. And so part of that neighborhood safety plan was a request for 2 additional street outreach workers, which my office funded at $440,000. So we created 2 positions and are contracting with REACH to make sure that those folks speak the languages that are in the community. And then the other thing that we're doing is continuing these conversations with small businesses, because we know that they have some challenges with security cameras that are getting stolen, the cost of installing fences, and really trying to change the conditions there so that everybody feels safe and the businesses feel safe.
Candidate Woo, I know you got a follow-up. I will give you 30 seconds, but first I have to cut you in line. I have a follow-up. I have to do this. There's so many people who wrote into us, and their question for you specifically was, why have you allowed that area to get so bad? So what I want to ask is, do you feel that it's a fair assessment to lay the blame on you for that area? And how do you think that that area got so bad?
Sure. Well, I mean, no, I don't think it's fair. The fentanyl crisis is a nationwide crisis. We have been doing everything we can to make sure that we are providing more support for street outreach workers, for the kind of diversion programs. During the COVID crisis, we worked with Co-Lead and Just Care to move homeless folks into hotels and to try to get them direct connection to services. Unfortunately, neither the previous mayor nor the current one are funding that program the way they need, and this is contributing to that.
Thank you. Would you like the 30 seconds?
Yes, so we've seen the rise in vendors from as early as 2020, and we've been sounding the alarm. We saw the storm coming when fentanyl showed up 2 years ago, and we needed help. And we still are having these meetings ongoing, but we haven't seen Councilmember Morales' offices there. Also, according to the safety plan that Friends of Little Saigon put together, we asked for ambassadors, and we got REACH, which is homeless outreach workers, because we realize people there are housed. And so we are hoping that, we don't see the outreach workers yet, and if they have not been contracted, we'd like to have that money brought in and used as ambassadors.
Thank you. Councilmember Morales, would you like to respond, or should we keep going? Okay. This question was directly to candidate Woo. Please explain your connection to the community in South Seattle and the impact you've made in the neighborhood before deciding to run for city council. 90 seconds.
Yes, and so in 2020, when pandemic started and we were quarantining, we saw a group of people who were not connected to the George Floyd protests come through the district, being pushed there by SBD, breaking windows, looting our small businesses in the CID. And so we strapped on our masks and we went out and we patrolled our neighborhood. And we tried to give hope to seniors. There was a lot of anti-Asian hate at that time. Seniors were afraid to come out after 4 p.m. And they would go in the parking lots and walk in circles to get exercise. We started doing senior escorts, we did senior self-defense classes. We believe that by walking the streets, safety in numbers, and our numbers would be deterrent. And we hope to bring hope. Try to connect seniors to vaccines. Then when encampments started popping up, we went in there and tried to connect our in-house with services. We saw who was in need of services, and we also saw who was preying our in-house, unfortunately. And so we were out there, we have feet in the ground, we saw what's happening in our streets. We saw fentanyl come into the fold 2 years ago, and have been out ever since. Also, my family built and renovated the Louisville Hotel after 2013 and devastating fire that was there. So I've been through the whole building process. I know how to build, I know how to build efficiently, and know how to bring more affordable housing. Like I said, Louisa is workforce housing. I'm a longtime resident in Rainier Valley. I live a couple of blocks away from Rainier Beach Safeway, so I hear the gunshots and realize that public safety is the number one concern in the district.
Thank you.
Well, I will say the question was about what you've done at the South End, not in the CID. Have had is that your endorser, one of the folks who wrote an opinion piece for you, referred to this incident, which was terrible, watching protesters have to respond to the BLM issue, to the George Floyd murder. And when those folks went through, these Black Lives Matter protesters went through the CID, your endorser referred to them as savages. So I'd like to know why you are appreciating an endorsement from somebody who would refer to BLM protesters as savages.
Would you like 30 seconds to respond to that?
Yes, thank you for that question. I don't know whom you're referring to, but I would need to investigate this further because I was not aware of the situation.
Excuse me, candidate Woo, there was a follow-up to that same question that came in, and it was, please explain why you have not participated as a voter. Please explain why you have not participated as a voter in elections before you decided to run for office.
Yes, thank you for that question. I take ownership that I made a mistake. I should have voted. But I cannot go back and change the past, but what I have been doing is I've been registering voters. You have to realize, look at South Seattle, look at who's voting, the demographic that's voting. It's very different than the actual demographics of South Seattle. There are systemic barriers in place for communities of color to actually have access to voting, language barriers, outreach, and engagement. There's been such disinvestment in the CID, I didn't feel like my voice mattered.
Councilmember Morales, the next question is for you. I'm seeing a theme from our readers here. What do you say to community members who feel you have abandoned the CID? What message do you have for that specific community moving forward?
Sure, I hear this a lot as well. What I will say is that I have organized in the last year or two at least 100 community meetings, not all of them in the CID, but many of them in the CID. And the work that my office does is to organize with community, to listen to the challenges, the frustrations, the solutions that community has to offer, and then really try to implement those. And those 100 meetings are just the ones I've been to. My staff has to go to many of these meetings because we have 20 neighborhoods in the district, and I try to be at as many of them as possible, but I can't be everywhere all the time. So what I will say is that our office continues to organize, to meet with folks in the CID, to try to find solutions and to try to continue funding the kind of plans that my opponent's talking about. We funded the neighborhood safety plan. We put $800,000 in for the CID neighborhood plan. And that's the kind of investment and attention that we are trying to give to that neighborhood.
Did you want a rebuttal?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
I think one of the biggest concerns is that the meetings aren't just going to do it. We would like engagement, meaningful engagement. Last year when the civil shelter wanted to expand, we're not anti-shelter, we just wanted to have a voice at the table, and our community was in crisis after having our windows broken, after all the Asian hate instances, and people were asking, where's Tammy? Where were you? And so I think meetings are great, but we would like to see more engagement and possibly more solutions.
So what I will say is that we were engaged, you and I, Tanya, had a few phone conversations. We had email exchanges about what that situation was. It's true, I was not out in front of the cameras. I was working with our county partners. This was a county project after all, to try to understand what this project was. We all heard about it at the same time. And we were trying to work with community members to understand if there was a compromise that we could reach. We had several conversations trying to get this meeting set up. In the meantime, the county canceled the project. And so, my role is to really try to understand how we can convene and find a solution. And the county ended up canceling the project.
Thank you.
We actually didn't meet until the county had actually canceled the project, I think about a week and a half later. And we had one phone call which you said you're going to keep an eye on the secret process, which we were already doing. So, but it's interesting to hear that, the county passed this project in May for a facility that was supposed to open in November, but we didn't know about till September. And so we've been just trying to get the word out. That was the main issue, was just trying to get the word out, get the racial equity toolkits recognized, because we didn't feel like the city or the county is following it.
Thank you. Would you like to respond? Or can we? Okay, perfect. I will give you the next question, Councilman. What is your plan to address housing? Specifically, how will you make housing more affordable and accessible for middle and low income residents in the South End?
Sure, well, thank you for that. What I hear from small businesses over and over again is that they're losing workers because folks can't afford to live in Seattle anymore. So this is a huge problem. We can't have a strong economy without workers who are living here. So there are several things that we've been doing. As a city, we are investing hundreds of millions of dollars in more affordable housing. I've got two pieces of legislation that we're working on to try to increase this. Well, I will say we've got one piece of legislation, the equitable development zoning, that is going to provide opportunity for developers to partner with community-based organizations that are focused on anti-displacement measures to provide more mixed income apartments And we will give them a density bonus if they locate those in areas where apartments have historically not been allowed, where racial covenants have existed. The other thing I'm working on is the social housing development project that passed last year with the ballot initiative. And the issue here is that we really have to take the cost of land out of production. So the social housing board is just starting, but the point there is to use city-owned land and make it permanently affordable by giving a 99-year lease to these developers, to these organizations, and to provide this mix of income housing for folks, so that if you are, at 0% AMI or if you're at 120% AMI, you can ensure that your unit gets passed on to the next generation.
Thank you. I'm going to give you the same question, but this was a two-parter. So I want to give you 30 seconds on the second part, and then I'll give you both. The second part of the question is, elders in our community are also in dire need of housing and resources, excuse me, and folks with a fixed income are at risk of rising rents. What do you plan to do to help ensure that the elders in the South End can stay in the South End?
Sure, well, that's a huge issue. Part of what we have been working on is eviction moratorium. So we closed the just cause eviction loophole that allows landlords to push somebody out at the end of their lease. Renter protections is a huge part of what we need to do to make sure that folks are able to stay in the city. So, and seniors are included in that. I was talking to somebody at the forum we did last night whose neighbor was kicked out and they did not receive the rental relocation assistance they're supposed to have. So enforcing the renter protection laws is a huge part of how we do that.
Thank you. Candidate Woo, I ask you the same question. What is your plan to address housing? Specifically, how will you make housing more affordable and accessible for middle and low-income residents in the South End? 90 seconds.
Yes, I agree with everything Councilmember Morales said. We also need more private-public partnerships in terms of housing vouchers, rental assistance, and we need to basically build more housing and being able to build more housing efficiently and fast, streamlining our permitting system, as well as helping the small property owners be able to build duplexes or units on their land. We need to be able to not only help those who are renting, but also help with home ownership, helping families with mortgages who have been displaced or gentrified or who have historically suffered the effects of redlining or segregation in this area. And so I think it's not only just for renters, but also for homeowners, which is land trusts or co-ops or groups can buy land together and be able to share in its land ownership benefits. And so being able to look at all of the above solutions to attack this issue would be beneficial.
Thank you. And I want to ask you the same follow-up in regards to elders. What is your plan to ensure that folks on fixed incomes will be able to stay in the homes they're currently in?
Yes, that's a big issue in the Chinatown International District. I feel like people are slowly being pushed out. We have elders who get dropped off in the CID in the morning and get picked up to go home. And that Chinatown is the cultural home of many Asian Americans in the community. And so programs, senior living houses that run the Skip Their Interim, these programs I think need more, support, rental assistance, looking at property taxes in the larger areas where seniors are living at home and need assistance.
Thank you. I'm going to stay with you for the next question, Candidate Woo, but both of you will have an opportunity. Do you believe that the Seattle Police Department needs 1,400 officers to properly provide public safety? And if so, what has led you to this conclusion?
I don't know what the right number is. We may need less, we need more, but one thing I do know is that we need alternatives to policing. When my group got started, we didn't think that we would still be operating right now. We only operated to fill a gap in services that we saw because the police department was busy elsewhere in the city. And we're tired and we like to not have to exist because our position that we have would have been filled by the city by now. And so I believe we need reform and we need culturally competent training, but we do absolutely need police. We need them to be supported and have the resources they need to succeed. We need our call times down from 7 minutes to 4 minutes, and we need to be able to investigate and solve crimes, basically. At 14 home robberies in Beacon Hill, they were able to apprehend 5 suspects, but at the same time, areas in the city suffered in a way where at the Wingwood Museum, when we had a hate crime experience there a couple weeks ago, it took 45 minutes for officers to show up. And so it'd be great to get to a point where when we call officers that they will show up, we don't have to worry about the fact that they're too busy and they won't come because this is not a priority 1 crime. And so being able to have a resource department and having that alternative to policing, whereas there are social workers or whether it's LEAD or REACH out there working together with community and basically looking at community solutions is a good short-term response to the crime that we're seeing here, but long-term, there are other ways we can go about this.
Councilmember Morales, same question. Would you like me to reread it? Yes. Do you believe that the Seattle Police Department needs 1,400 officers to properly provide public safety? And if so, what has led you to this conclusion?
No, I do not believe that. Look, across the country, departments are having a hard time staffing up. And I think that is in part because the next generation isn't interested in policing. So, that's not a problem unique to Seattle. The nature of policing is changing. What I will also say is that, the department can't hire the number of officers they've already been funded for. So adding funding for an additional 300 officers just doesn't make sense, at least not right now. The other thing I'll say is that we have an internal department problem. When even officers like Detective Cookie Bolden are suing the department for discrimination, there's a problem here. So I don't think we can really look to this department for safety right now when there's a lot of internal work to do. And I would say that the staffing issue is due, at least in part, because of the culture of the department, and the call is sort of coming from inside the house. So in terms of what we need to do for safety instead, there is lots of things that we've been talking about in this community. We need alternative crisis response for folks who are experiencing mental health crises or experiencing addiction crises. We need trained experts to respond to that, not police. And then we need groups like Urban Family, the Southeast Network Safety Net, the groups that are doing violence interruption, diversion, victim support after there is an incident with our young people. There are lots of other solutions.
Candidate Woo, 30 seconds.
So Councilmember Morales voted to defund police, which was actually did not pass several times. And even though police was not defunded, they've been demoralized. We had 600 officers leave the force. And I think that's because the city council set a tone and an attitude that the rest of the city has followed in terms of not being supportive of officers. They left in droves. And so I think having that change in attitude upcoming in the next election cycle would help with hiring and with morale.
I get to President Morales, but I do have a follow-up that was specifically for candidate Woo, which is, what do you say to folks specifically in the BIPOC community who say that we need public safety, but also point to the disproportionate amount of violence that SPD has done to BIPOC folks, who see the statistical data of who is engaged with the most by SPD, who they use force on the most, right? Like, what do you say to those BIPOC folks who want safety, but they also don't really feel safe around SPD? 30 seconds.
Yes, I acknowledge that. Disproportionately, South End here, we've experienced, bad things by officers. Just recently, officer was saying racist remarks to their elderly Asian neighbor. We had that officer who mentioned a young lady's life had no value, and that's unacceptable, and those officers need to be relieved of duty. But at the same time, we can't stereotype an entire department based on a few bad officers. And with my group, we go out into the community we cannot help when it comes to violent crimes. When there's a shooting a couple tents away from us, we had to call police. I mean, we are not trained to deal with guns or knives.
Thank you.
I mean, I have two examples now of how we seem to agree. Relieving officers of duty when they have unprofessional behavior. Agree with you on that one. What I will say is that I did vote to abrogate positions that were funded but unfilled and move that money into community safety measures. That's the vote that I took. And what I will say is that candidate Woo agrees with me. When she was on Hacks and Wonks, she agreed with that same statement of whether removing money from positions and moving it to other public safety measures is the right thing to do. And she said yes. So I think we're in agreement on that.
Thank you. And Councilmember Morales, I'm going to stay with you for this next question first. With the number of pedestrian deaths in our city being sky high and a disproportionate amount of collisions happening in the South End, what changes would you like to see happen on Rainier Avenue and MLK for more safety?
Well, thank you for that question. 57% to be exact of traffic fatalities in the city happen in District 2 because our roads are designed for speed. They're designed too wide with straightaways, and we really, that's the first priority, is looking at how we design our streets so that they don't encourage people to speed. You know, I'm also introducing legislation, complete streets ordinance, that would require SDOT to put sidewalks in whenever they're doing a new road project, because as we know in the South End, we don't have sidewalks in much of the city, much of the district. And you know, the other thing that we have started to do downtown is the no right on red, which I think is important. It's been proven effective at preventing some pedestrian car collisions, but we need to do that everywhere in the city and at a much faster pace than is happening right now. So there's a lot of work that we can be doing. I will say that it does feel to me, part of the challenge is that SDOT is really siloed with their different divisions. Their road crew does one thing, their curb cuts do another thing. The new director is really trying to integrate those divisions more carefully and really starting to prioritize public safety. We have a new, I forget his official title, but he's like the director of safety within the transportation department. And all of those things have come because I have been crying about this for 4 years because I am tired of announcing to my colleagues at our Monday briefings that other pedestrians have died in my district. So this is work that I've really been championing, and I will continue to do that.
Candidate Woo, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. With the number of pedestrian deaths in our city being sky high and a disproportionate amount of collisions happening in the South End, what changes would you like to see happen on Rainier Avenue and on MLK?
Yes, I think we're averaging 16 deaths a year from pedestrian accidents. I mean, it's not getting any better. We're averaging, that's kind of flatlined. And we really need to look at, like Councilman Morales said, the built environment. And we can't, it's not a one-size-fits-all policy. We're breaking it down neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block, and seeing what the issues are, listening to community and neighbors. And our comprehensive plan is coming up, and then the transportation plan as well. And making sure that, it feels like in South Seattle, we have the least amount of sidewalks. We have a lot of planning we have to do with juggling what's happening on Rainier with that bus lane, and then seeing that traffic spill in Beacon Hill into our neighborhoods, into Lake Washington Boulevard, and now the possible closure of Lake Washington Boulevard. And so having a comprehensive plan, looking at roads and seeing what changes we can tweak, and having the opportunity to go back and reverse anything if it's not working. And so I think it's just going to take the whole community input just to see what's happening neighborhood by neighborhood.
Thank you. Councilmember Morales, I'll give you the first crack at this next one. What changes would you like to see in the new Seattle Police Officers Guild contract? And how can this contract be leveraged to ensure more police accountability and more safety for people in our community?
Yeah, thank you for that. The first thing I'll say is that I don't believe that we can reform our department. I don't think going department by department, city by city is the way to do this. I really think that the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability is looking at statewide changes that need to happen, and that is going to be part of the city's legislative agenda for session next year. So, you know, there is a lot of work that needs to happen, but we need to make sure that across the state, departments are held to the same standard, because what's happening now is if somebody leaves one department because they've been dinged for something, unprofessional behavior or worse, they just go to a different department in a different city. So it's really important that we make sure that officers across the state are held to the same standards. In terms of our SPOG contract, I will say that I don't sit on that committee, and so even if I did, I couldn't really talk about what the negotiations are. But what I will say is that I won't vote for a contract that does not include the accountability measures that were part of the 2017 contract that had originally been negotiated. And that means making sure that arbitration, there is no arbitration for disciplinary, for discipline cops, you know, the chief can't be overturned, that we can't go to negotiating away accountability measures. That should not be on the table in this contract. The parameters should be around working conditions and, you know, sort of typical labor contracts, but not accountability.
Candidate Woo, I asked you the same question. Would you like me to reread it?
Yes, please.
Okay. What changes would you like to see in the new Seattle Police Officers Guild contract? And how can this contract be leveraged to ensure more police accountability and more safety for people in our community?
As I think we should have a civilian oversight committee that's not only involved when officers get in trouble, but also involved in picking out captains and lieutenants in different precincts. That way, people have a say in who's leading that community. We need more accountability when it comes to overtime hours as well. And we also need that alternatives to policing. I think that's the biggest barrier, is that it's in that contract where we cannot have alternatives to policing, and we need to make sure that that is in place where we can have social workers and caseworkers, maybe not part of the police department, but have also access to police department information, which can be very difficult. And also, I think we also like to change, we need a culture change, and I don't know how much the contract can look into that, but making sure that, you know, there is more oversight when it comes to community, and more interactions, more engagement, and how we're also hiring. We need to hire more female officers, we need to hire more officers of color, and basically we also need to collaborate with our SPD officers and just really get down to the root of what is going on and why they're asking for certain things within the contract.
Thank you. Councilmember Morales.
Yeah, just to the point about the culture of the department, you know, we need accountability, absolutely, and the challenge is that there is a toxic culture in this department right now. I think the fact that, you know, the officer who laughed about the woman who was killed was himself the vice president of the police union is indicative of the problem, right? That those officers were elected by the majority of their membership. So that culture is not just a few bad apples. They're electing leaders who reflect white supremacy and a willingness to hold our public in contempt.
That's right.
Thank you. Next, the last question of this round, and I am going to go to candidate Woo first. What do you see as the greatest challenge to South Seattle, and how do you plan to address it?
Oh, the greatest challenge to South Seattle. It's the legacy of segregation and redlining and the disinvestment that we see in our districts compared to other districts. We go to 12th and Jackson, we go to the CID, we go to the Rainier Beach Safeway. The feeling of public safety, our homicide rate is going to surpass our rates from last year, and more than a third of those homicides happen here in South Seattle. And so I think we need more collaboration between our different communities, more support for small businesses, more youth activities. We're not at pre-pandemic levels when it comes to programming in our community centers, in our libraries. And also, how do we get more of our young adults into trades, into apprenticeships, and finding good living wage jobs for people. I think people are just getting pushed out. There's too much gentrification and displacement happening here. We saw what happened in the CD. And we have to put together a plan to prevent that. And we need good leaders who can see the coming storm, be able to plan for that. Just like fentanyl is devastating right now. We saw it coming and we need to have a plan in 2 years. We need action. We just cannot risk having ideological debates. We need to put solutions and go back to the basics and really look and do what the city charter dictates for our city council members for South Seattle, which is looking at transportation infrastructure. We have to look at really public safety. And we also have to make sure that people can live and work here.
Thank you. Councilmember Morales, do you need me to reread the question?
Sure.
Okay. What do you see as the greatest challenge to South Seattle, and how do you plan to address it?
So, as I said at the beginning, I got into this work because I really want to make sure that we are stopping the displacement that's happening of our Black and brown neighbors and our small businesses. As somebody who's trained as a planner, that's the work I've been doing. So we need to ensure affordability so that people can afford to stay here. That means good union wage jobs. That means access to benefits. It means economic opportunity for our young people, which is why I put $1 million in the budget to connect them to apprenticeship programs, because not everybody is going to go to college and they still need a pathway to take care of themselves and their families. The other thing I'll say is that, as we've already talked about, it is dangerous to live in the South End, in part because of the way our roads are designed. We have the Lighthouse for the Blind here. We have lots of folks who are disabled living in the South End who can't navigate our streets, can't navigate our sidewalks, and they put their lives at risk every day trying to get around our communities. So it is important to me that we make sure in the transportation levy package that's coming next year, in the comp plan that we'll be working on next year, and all the work that we're doing with Sound Transit and with SDOT, that we get serious about making sure that our elders, our kids, people who walk, bike, roll around our communities to get around can do it safely. It is no joke. People are dying every day on our streets, and they deserve to be able to get to work or get to the grocery store or get wherever they need to go without worrying about getting hit by a car.
Thank you. All right, thank you both. We're going to take a 6-minute break. So we're going to take a break until 8:05. When we come back, we're going to have some special guests ask a couple questions. Thank you.
You don't believe the race car bullshit that she said? White supremacy?
Road safety over public safety?
It's a public.
Get out of here.
People, he's the one who said it, my friend. Okay, I'm not going to make comments, so calm down.
Anyone have any questions?
Yeah. How are you doing?
Anyone have any questions?
How's it going?
It's nice to see the people in the classes.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna hang out for a little bit. Yeah.
Test, test, test. Okay, we are about to come back. At this time, can I have both candidates back to the podium, please? Thank you.
Now who's the group doing the video? Is that real you?
Perfect. Okay. So at this time, I am going to invite up a couple of special friends to ask some questions. They are going to introduce themselves to the both of you and to all of you. Are y'all ready? Come on.
Hi, I'm Mary Mohammed, and I'm the newsroom director and reporter for Ground Zero Radio. And for content, our state senate passed a transformative gun safety law in April 2023, banning the manufacturing, selling, and importing of assault weapons in Washington state. However, the effects of gun violence still lingers throughout communities in District 2, and especially for young people who risk their lives going to school every day. If elected or re-elected, how will we work to allocate funds and resources in meeting the mental and psychological needs of youth who live in District 2?
Who would you like to go first?
Morales, please?
Same 90 seconds?
Yes.
Okay. Look, we know why some communities suffer from gun violence. It's because decades of policy that have left our communities under-resourced. And it's time to get serious about ending this, which is why we have to change the community conditions that lead to violence in the first place, which is what I've been saying for 4 years now. It's great that the state is leading on gun responsibility, and you're right, we passed several things at the legislature, but we need to own up to the impact of the disinvestment for generations in the South End, and it really means prevention, which means we have to take a public health approach to this. So what that means is asking the question, why are some people experience more at risk for gun violence? What are their adverse childhood experiences that lead people to move down a certain path? We have to work with schools so that students and educators understand what somebody who's at risk for gun violence looks like. We have to knit back our communities. Prevention also means creating community safety plans. So we talked already about investing in organizations like Southeast Network Safety Net, Choose 180, Community Passageways, Urban Family. All of these organizations do diversion work, they do violence interruption work, they work with families afterward. We need to scale all of those up because they are proven effective at preventing violence. So we need to do that. And the last thing I'll say is building a prevention infrastructure, which is what I just said. Scaling up the resources we give. We gave them $4 million to create a community safety initiative, all these organizations, and we need to be doing much more.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, of course. If elected, how will you work to allocate funds and resources in meeting the mental and psychological needs of youth who live in District 2 who've been affected by gun violence?
As coming out of the pandemic, I feel like our young people need more support than ever, especially going back into school and spending quarantine in the last 4 years studying from home. And I think it's about building community, especially in our schools, in our neighborhoods. I remember growing up being able to play with my friends, and we all knew each other's parents, and we were held accountable. We got in trouble with one parent, the other parent would know, everyone would know, and we'd be held accountable for our actions. So building community, knowing one another, as well as programming within our schools, after-school activities, community centers, programs that allow for us to follow our passions. Growing up in the 1990s, gang violence was huge. I had friends and family who were in gangs, who died due to gang violence, and there were a lot of initiatives to help youth at that time, and we saw what worked but did not work. We saw that gang violence kind of just slowed down in the early 2000s, and so how do we bring those youth programming back up, youth initiatives, as well as gun buybacks. But I think it's all about empowerment, how do we empower our youth and our communities to be able to come up with their own solutions, come up with their own plans, and enact that, as well as allowing our youth to follow their passions, having good living wage jobs, and not having alternatives that leads down to the path where they're empowered virtually with guns. And so I think it does start with the youth, though.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tammy Morales, pronouns she, hers. I am the editor of Real Change News. And since we started with Councilmember Morales, I will start with Tanya Woo. Throughout this debate, there's been a lot of mention of preventing displacement in District 2. How do you reintegrate people who are living out on the streets of the neighborhoods of District 2 back into their communities that perhaps they have been displaced from?
Yes, I think there's two parts to this. How do we prevent people from losing their homes? Rental assistance, more supportive help before they get to the point where they're on the streets. I think it's inhumane to allow people to live outside. We need to make sure we're actively doing the outreach and engagement and building trust with our unhoused neighbors to allow for them to accept these resources to come back in. Many people I've worked with have lost trust because the system is simply broken, because maybe they've gone to a shelter and it's run by a religious organization that is not LGBTQI friendly, or they were lost, living with their partner, or living with their service animal. And so trying to get to the root cause, and it's different for everybody. I believe we need more hotel vouchers, we need more tiny home villages, RV safe lots, to allow for people to be able to have a choice in where they want to go and be able to come back. And then with these assisted programs, have the wraparound services available to help get people back to a good place. There's a lot of mental health, behavioral health issues, addiction issues, because people are self-medicating from being on the street. So how do we get to the root cause of the issue and then partner with people to help them along their journey and making sure that we're holding everyone accountable and giving them pathways to get out of the situation where they're in and to be able to settle back inside.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. So throughout the debate, there's been a lot of mention of preventing displacement in District 2. How do you integrate people who are living out on the streets, the neighborhoods of District 2, back into their communities that they have been displaced from?
Great, thank you, Ms. Morales, no relation, anyway. Yeah, so, we're seeing some of this happen right now, right? We've got a couple tiny house villages near the Rainier Beach Station. We have a new tent city up on, I can't remember what street. And we know that folks need the opportunity to get stabilized. I think that's the first thing. And people become homeless for lots of different reasons, and so we need to take the time to understand what moved somebody into the situation. Not everybody who's homeless is addicted to drugs. Not everybody who's homeless has an acute mental health problem. For those folks, we need more treatment and services, and we need the outreach workers who will connect them to those services. But a lot of this is about people who have lost a job, or had a medical bill, or got evicted because their lease was up and their landlord kicked them out. So there are a lot of things that we need to do is figure out what is the individual need that person has. These are the things that I've been investing in for the last 4 years. It's not just affordable housing, it's also permanent supportive housing for those folks who do need that more acute behavioral health care. We do need more tiny house villages. That's why I voted for 40 more so that people have a sanctioned place to be and get access to services. And then we need to close the eviction loophole so people would stop getting kicked out and try to prevent homelessness in the first place.
This question's first for Councilmember Morales. You both talk specifically about different demographics belonging to District 2. Councilmember refers to Black and brown folks a lot, while candidate Woo talks a lot about the AAPI community. How do you balance uplifting the communities you identify and belong with the greater demographics of the district that you may not specifically identify with?
That's a great question. Thank you. In 2020, I think we started using the phrase BIPOC, and people didn't like that. And this is a tricky thing. Like, how we identify is one thing, but then how we talk about communities of color is a different thing, and I think it changes fairly often. I will say, for me, when I say Black and brown people, what I mean is communities of color. Without listing every ethnicity and immigrant and refugee group that we have in this district, because there are many. And so, what I will say is that the work that I do is rooted in trying to make sure that communities of color are protected get access to resources. The work that I do, whether it's policymaking or budget decisions, is all guided by 3 principles, which everybody's probably tired of hearing me talk about. But they are repairing the harm done to Black and brown communities. We talked about generations of bad city policy. Yeah, we got to fix that, and that's what I'm doing. They're also guided by the need to democratize access to power and resources. That means community-led, and that's what I've been doing for 20 years. Hearing directly from community organizations, community leaders about what solutions they have, and then taking that into City Hall, into the halls of power. And the third thing is planning for the 7th generation. So everything we do really needs to address and acknowledge that we are in a global climate crisis. The world is on fire, and we have to get serious about fixing it.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, of course. You both talk specifically about different demographics belonging to District 2. Councilmember Morales refers to Black and brown folks a lot, while candidate Woo refers to the API community. How do you balance uplifting the communities you identify and belong with the greater demographics of the district that you may not identify with?
Yes, so I've lived in this district my entire life. And I did not live in the CID. I lived in Beacon Hill, and I lived in the Rainier Valley area. And even within the CID, it's not just Asians who live there. It's a huge, diverse population. And so I feel like the Black community, no community has been as marginalized as that community. And based on my experiences as an Asian female, with trying to integrate the CID community into the political process, because we did not feel like we had a seat at the table, we did not feel like we were being heard, and trying to lead groups of the CID community members, refugee, immigrants, non-English speakers into City Hall, into King County Council chambers, to give public comment and be more involved in the political process was actually very difficult. And so we requested a translator. I wasn't able to get one, even though we had requested it weeks in advance. We had to bring our own, and translation only goes one way, towards the council members and not towards the community. No one knew what was going on. And so we had to stand up and yell at people so people can understand what's happening. And so if that's happening within the CID blocks away from City Hall, I'm hearing from other community members that they feel the same way, and that's because we need to do extra outreach and engagement, especially to our communities of color who do not speak English as their first language. And how do we get them more integrated in the political process, as well as able to work with schools and with their children, because that just really changes the dynamic when you don't know the language. And we need to work harder to make sure we connect people to resources.
Do you have a question? Do you have time for one more question, Mike? Earlier, you were both asked a question about whether or not you supported the sweeping of encampments, and you both had very different answers. I was previously asked a question about homelessness and how do you address people who have been displaced from your communities. Councilmember Morales, you said that you do not support the sweeps of encampments. I want to know why. Candidate Woo, you said that you do, and I want to know why. Councilmember Morales.
Sure. I don't support sweeps because there's nowhere for people to go. They are a waste of money. We don't have enough. We have about 6,000 shelter beds in King County. We have about 48,000 homeless people in King County. So even if everybody who was offered a shelter bed, which is only for one night, and then the next morning they're back out on the street, even if everybody said yes, 42,000 people would still be on the street. So we are wasting valuable city resources on police, who are part of these encampment removals, on wasting resources on the outreach workers who go out to try to provide service, and then they go back and they can't find these folks, and so they have to go, they're not able to deliver care. And we're really just causing more trauma to people who are already in a dire situation, and now they've lost their belongings, they've lost their ability to, bed down for the night, and they've lost their community. So it is just triggering more trauma when people are removed from whatever, home or community they have, and it doesn't solve the problem for anybody, except for the people who are complaining about having to look at poor people.
That's right.
Candidate Woo, did you want me to repeat the question?
Why do I support sweeps?
Yes.
Well, I actually don't. I think we need to continuously do that outreach and engagement.
Can I
Yes.
interject for 1 second? In the rapid fire paddle you did put.
Yes, I did. But if
Can I understand your reasoning for that?
I'm sorry?
Can I get understanding of why you're reasoning for that?
Yes. So if we're actively doing the outreach and engagement, which is kind of similar to what my group does, we go out to the encampments, we try to help with resources, we make friends with people, because people are not willing to accept shelter because of course they've been through a broken system, they don't want to go into congregate shelters, they want tiny houses, they want hotel vouchers, and so there's a lot of trauma associated with that. And so we're constantly going out there, building that trust, building relationships, getting to know what people's root causes are, and seeing what really happens in our encampments. There are people who really do need services, but at the same time, last year the CID had about 7 or 8 homicides. We had the highest in all of Seattle, and all of those homicides, except for one, was within our encampments. And so you get to know the encampments, you know who is the actual people who need services and who are there to pray or are unhoused, people who are engaged in prostitution, fentanyl sales. And so I think, we've seen a lot of people die because of fentanyl deaths. And we need to bring people inside. And so not only that, but if we're constantly doing the outreach and engagement, trying to bring people in as they appear, I think that would eliminate the need for sweeps. My building, Louisa Hotel, we had 20 units working with a group called Housing Connector that houses are formerly unhoused. I think we need more private-public partnerships. The Tiny House Village group they build out 4 tiny homes a week. And we need to help support those efforts and try to find the land to be able to build these houses.
Yeah, it's true that these homeless encampments are preyed upon, absolutely, but that is not a reason to sweep everybody. I agree that the police should go in and identify who's bringing drugs and trafficking in drugs, who's bringing in sex trafficking, who's causing the violence that's happening, absolutely, but that doesn't mean everybody has to go because not everybody's doing that. The other thing is that building trust with outreach workers takes time. And when you're being swept in 72 hours or less, you don't have time to build those relationships.
Thank you, Vera.
Are you done, Dominique?
Yes, done.
That was excellent. In case y'all don't know, that Dominique is the new managing editor at Real Change. Congratulations. Excellent questions. I have a stack of questions from the audience here. We want to eat dinner tonight with our families, so we're not going to get to every single question, but I promise y'all I'll do my best. This one right here is an excellent question. I love it, so I'm going to go with this one first, and I'm going to start with Councilmember Morales. What role do you see a council person playing in inviting, encouraging, including youth in civic engagement?
That's a great question. So part of the job of a council member is to pass a budget, pass policy, but it's also to advocate for you. And the way we do that is to meet with you and talk with you and hear from you. So it's been really important to me, especially given the things that have happened in the last couple of years, to meet with our young people. So I meet regularly with young people from different high schools. They come into our office to understand how city council works. And we've also been meeting a lot because of some of the safety issues that have been happening. I also happen to oversee our Department of Education and Early Learning. And so part of what we did in the last few budgets is to meet with young people to hear what they would like to see from the city in terms of resources. The city doesn't have a lot of money for education, that's mostly the school district. But we have put $500,000 in the last few years for restorative justice programming for our high schools. We've put $500,000 in for leadership and mentorship programs for Black girls and queer and trans youth so that they have access to training and leadership development. We put in several $1 million last year for mental health supports and are working closely with students at Rainier Beach High School to make sure that, and the Seattle Student Union, to make sure that that money gets deployed in a way that the students actually want rather than just the administrators. So engagement is key.
Before we move on, I have a follow-up for you. How can you address the rising cost of childcare? 30 seconds. Answer that whole thing in 30 seconds.
I don't know that I can address the cost of childcare. What I will say is that the cost of childcare is outrageous. It is more than college. And what we really need is more support from the feds and from the states to acknowledge that our childcare workers who we trust with our littlest Seattleites deserve a living wage and they deserve access to benefits. So this is a huge problem. I don't have a quick answer for you, but it is one that we are working on, and one of the things that we've done in the city budget the last few years is at least add some bonuses for childcare workers in the city, given some of the extra federal funding that we have.
Thank you. Candidate Woo, I asked you the original question. What role do you see a council person playing in inviting, encouraging, and including youth in civic engagement?
Yeah, so I grew up in attending the Seattle Chinese Community Girls Drill Team. And at that time, Councilmember Cheryl Chow was one of our instructors, and I think it's about representation. Me as a young child, seeing an Asian American woman as a city council member, she took me into the office for Take Your Daughter to Work Day. Make sure the doors are always open. So there was a whole group of us, I think 20 of us, who went to Take Your Daughter to Work Day at City Council Chambers, and she had internship programs. Cheryl Chow worked really closely with the school board, trying to go to schools and talk about her involvement, and was always open to talk about youth, because she was so active in the youth community regarding, she was a former teacher, but integrating the schools into her work as a city council member, and seeing what she was doing was quite amazing and inspiring for me. And so I think, Councilmember Morales talks about putting money into all these programs, and there are a lot of nonprofit groups that does great work, but we need policy change, not pocket change. We need to look at our policies to make sure that, our youth are engaged and involved with the city process, and it comes with representation, it comes with involvement with the schools. Because, we have all these great nonprofits, but they're fighting, I feel like, over pocket change. Everyone needs funding, unfortunately. And then for your second question regarding childcare providers, I think we need to help our small businesses. Most of these young childcare providers are small businesses just trying to survive like all other businesses. And now they're competing also with Seattle Public School programming. And I'm also fighting for funding with different organizations. And so how do we help our small business childcare providers, as well as private-public partnerships? How do we incentivize workplaces to offer childcare as part of their benefits package? And then also, especially working with our schools and making sure that these programs are not competing with one another, but also complementing one another.
Thank you. All right, this is a long one. It was for you, Councilmember, but I'm going to ask you both. It feels personal because Shelly put her name on it. So yes, Shelly, I am calling you out. Shelly says, I have lived in Rainier Valley for 35 years. My husband and I have been involved in Columbia City since 1998. We ran a small hotel here for 13 years, and we still live and work here. I'm speaking on my own behalf, but I know I share the concern of the other small businesses in Columbia City and all of District 2. Our locally owned small businesses, the majority of which are women and minority owned, have been hit with weekly traumas of property damage, senseless vandalism, break-ins, theft, and violence over the past 4 years. There's a lot. I'm going to jump down. So her question is, what will you do to strengthen the City of Seattle's resources to slow or stop the ongoing attacks against our small businesses and our residents and make crime a true priority in District 2? Councilmember Morales, I go to you first.
Okay, well, thank you, Shelley and Rob, I'm assuming. Look, I know that there's a lot happening throughout the district. We were at the Columbia City Theater last night and heard about 18 windows being broken. So it is scary to know that there's a lot of this sort of property crime that's happening, and I can completely understand the nervousness and the frustration. with having to replace all of that and pay for security, throughout the district, we're hearing similar things. What I will say is that, we have a department that is not responding. I hear this in my district, other council members hear this in their districts, that when small businesses call, they are told, this isn't a priority, we can't come out. And I frankly don't know the reason why folks aren't coming out, but I know that it is a problem. Frankly, I feel like there is a little bit of a work stoppage happening because we hear the same things in other cities and from other city council members across the country. So, this gets back to the issue that I was talking about earlier of really holding our department accountable for responding when there are issues happening in our community. The other thing I will say is that through our Office of Economic Development, we are providing some support, not nearly enough, for replacing windows, for replacing security systems, and working on an insurance program to help some of our small businesses.
Thank you. Councilmember Morales, I have to ask a follow-up. It is not written in front of me, but there were a lot of people who wrote in. They didn't write questions, but they wrote a very similar comment. And their comment said that when small businesses have reached out to you, you haven't always been responsive. So my question is, do you think it's true that you have not been responsive to small businesses? And what would you say to small business owners who may feel that way?
Well, I will say I'm sorry. We work hard in my office to respond to requests for assistance, requests for information, and we don't get to respond to everything. What I will say is that I have a staff member dedicated to working on small business issues, who is a district director, and we try really hard to connect with, at least connect with the different neighborhood business associations, so that we understand what some of the issues are. And again, as I said, we are working closely with, Heidi Hall at OED, who is the person down here in District 2, who kind of relays some of the issues that are happening, and try to work through the department to make sure that we're addressing the issues as well. And I'm always open to direct conversation and happy to give folks my phone number.
Thank you for addressing
Can I
that.
embellish this question?
Please don't. Please
Sorry.
Okay.
So, Candidate Woo, I want to ask you the same question. Are you going to make me read this long question from Shelley all over again?
Okay, got it. Okay. So yes, I agree with you. Cost of running a small business is so high. We have to deal with broken windows. We have graffiti, and when we don't clean up our graffiti, the city fines us $100 a day. We have to deal with looting and break-ins and having to pay for security. And security costs are enormous. And sometimes just overbearing. And so I believe that, Councilmember Morales, when looting was happening in downtown core, I understand when you said that, why are we so upset with, looting and broken windows when Black and brown folks are being killed by officers, I understand that, but why did you have to villainize businesses? Because that not only affected our small businesses as well. And I have to deal with broken windows. I'm trying to preserve murals, and that window is broken, I don't have the money to replace it. And so the whole city is not able to enjoy these beautiful black jazz murals that are in the basement of Louisa Hotel. And so we have to stand together and not allow this to happen, denounce these property crimes, and defend our small businesses. We need more incentives for our small businesses, more help. And we have that broken window fund, yet that doesn't really fulfill the cost of repairing our broken windows, and plus the process is just so arduous, it's kind of hard to go through it. And so how can we do more preventative measures versus responding? We want to put up cameras, and so that's a part of the reason why the neighborhood group came about.
Thank you. Councilmember Morales, would you like to respond before we move on? Okay. Next question.
Well, wasn't there a second part to that question?
I did. Well, the second follow-up was specifically for Councilmember Morales to respond, but 30 seconds. How would you work to make sure that communication is open and efficient between yourself and small business owners in District 2?
Yes. So I plan to have, if elected, office hours every single week, and be able to take requests and talk to people in person. I think that's most important, going out and being seen. When Morales, you talked about department, did you mean police department? So I wanted to ask that to get clarification. You were talking about people calling for help and why folks aren't coming out. You're talking about the police that you have been basically bashing this last 4 years?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah.
Would you like to respond, or would you like to move on?
We can move on.
Okay, totally different topic here, but I'm struggling just a little bit with this handwriting. It starts with everyone loves the library. The next levy is in 2026, and it can't be the main source of funding for the Seattle Public Library. Given the, okay, we need the library. Let me say that personally. I mean, that's a place where a lot of people in our community can access the internet. They want to fill out job applications. It's such an important resource. So, Candidate Woo, how will you make sure the library has the resources it needs in the coming budgets?
Yes, I believe a portion of library funding comes from the general fund as well as from the levy that's coming up in the next year or two. Yes, our libraries are treasures. I grew up in Beacon Hill Library. I understand it's, during the pandemic, they made the library digital open to everybody in the U.S. We have a great stock of banned books that people can access from anywhere, basically. And so I think making sure that, we are able to fund appropriately. There's mentorship programs, after-school homework help programs that are not quite up to pre-pandemic levels. It'd be nice to have also social workers present in libraries. I'm hearing from librarians that people come in who need help and they're not entirely sure what to do. And so how do we make sure that our libraries are staffed with social workers and with being able to involve youth in after-school activities, homework help, mentorship, and these are really important projects that I think need to continue. And so we really need to look hard at general funding, work with libraries to see what they're looking for. It costs us 3 times more to put a digital book online than it does to buy an actual physical book. And so just making sure lines of communication are open for that dialogue and that conversation.
Thank you. Councilmember Morales, same question. I can reread it if you.
Well, I get the question, and I don't think anybody undervalues libraries. There's an incredible resource in our community, and we have had a lot of challenges because, during the pandemic especially, we did rely on libraries to do work that librarians are not trained to do, like support folks who are homeless. And so we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we are adequately staffing libraries, that we are resourcing them to do some of the things that we're asking them to do, or make sure that we are resourcing other entities to do that work instead. In terms of how we pay for libraries, I think the challenge in our state, and certainly in our city, is that we have a very regressive tax system. And so we rely on property tax to fund a lot of basic city services, and the library levy is one example of that. So, right now it is out of balance, and I know what folks would like to see is for us to rely more on the general fund rather than this property tax, because the property tax is volatile. And so, that's part of the conversation that we'll be having in the budget process, which we are starting next week if you want to tune in. But yeah, we have lots of levies. All of them need to be adjusted, but it means that we have to rely on our general fund instead, and how we increase revenue is going to be the big question.
Thank you. Okay, I will go to Candidate Woo. In terms of transportation solutions, what do you think of electric minibuses?
Oh, love the idea. That sounds amazing. Yes, so we have, the setting of ST3 light rail stations coming up, and we need to make sure whether we have electric minibuses, whether we want to put a line in, we have to make sure that the community engagement outreach is there, making sure that we're fulfilling the needs of what community wants, that people understand what's happening, and generate excitement and involvement with that process. I think is really important, and especially making sure the outreach is done in language of choice is of paramount importance as well.
Thank you. Tammy Morales, same question. I can reread it.
Electric minibuses instead of a regular city bus?
In addition to
That person is in this room right now. Is it?
Well, my question is, what kinds of public transport solutions exist for our city going forward? And I just got back from Sweden and I saw that there was a large proportion of public transportation in comparison to private vehicles.
Yeah.
And I don't see that here in our city.
Fair enough. Yeah, so this is a bigger transportation question. The challenge is that in Seattle, folks have been asking for real public safety on our right-of-ways since the 70s, and it's time for us to deliver. That means that we really need to invest more in mass transit rather than relying on cars. We've got a global climate crisis. If we're going to get people out of our cars, we have to make that the easy choice. So that means we do need massive more investment in mass transit, and that's something that we have to work with the county on. Electric vehicle, we are making transitions to electrify our fleets. And so, that work has begun, but it's a question of staffing right now. In particular, it's a question of staffing, it's a question of bus maintenance. So assuming that we can build the roads that can prioritize buses and prioritize, safe sidewalks, prioritize protected bike lanes, that's how we start to make it easier for people to get out of their cars. And it's work that a lot of folks in the city are really advocating for, and I think SDOT is starting to move in that direction. So that's part of it. The other thing is that, we have to prioritize bus lanes that have the highest ridership and that are in areas like the South End where we have environmental climate justice issues as well. So we have a lot of poor air quality here in the South End, Beacon Hill. So we need to be prioritizing buses in those communities too.
Can we do 2 more questions?
Sure, why not?
Great.
Okay. I'm going to stay with you, Councilmember Morales. If there is so much agreement for alternatives to police for public safety, what's holding it up? Why are none of these alternatives not currently in place?
That is a great question. What I will say is that we have passed legislation. We have passed budgets allocating resources. The council has made it very clear that this is a priority. But the council's job is not to implement. That's the mayor's job. So I will leave it at that.
Thank you.
We have a lot of things that we've passed and we're waiting for money to be spent.
Thank you. Candidate Wu, same question. I can reread it if you need.
Oh no, so I saw that there was a need for an alternative policing, and I went and did it in 2020. Put our masks on, went out, and we patrolled our neighborhood, 3 neighborhoods to be exact. And so I was able to do that for the CAD, build more housing, bring out an alternative policing. I want to do that for the entire city. And we desperately need alternative policing, whether it's looking at lead and reach and looking at those models, we deliver care, maybe groups like my group, how do we elevate them to a higher level so they're able to carry out these functions in the entire city? Also, we would like to see more caseworkers being paid an actual living wage, maybe the same as a police officer being paid, to actually be separate from the police department, to go out there, build that trust, build those connections continuously, get to know people, having a system that works. I believe we do need KCRHA, we need a regional response for homelessness, we also need a regional response for the fentanyl deaths that we're seeing, because this is quickly becoming a crisis and people do move around, and be able to talk to what other cities are doing and be able to collaborate with other cities and see what works, what doesn't work, and having that response I think would be key. And so I am too frustrated at why we don't have an alternative to policing in place. I was able to do that really quickly, and I'm hoping that we will be able to do that together in the coming year.
Thank you. All right, the last question is actually a bonus question that comes from South Seattle Emerald founder Marcus Green. And I'm just, who wants to take it first? Do I have the taker, or who would like to go first for this final question?
I'll go first.
Perfect. So, you know, Marcus believes that as a community, the best thing that we can do is work together. And the thing that we all have in common is that we all care about each other. So, for the final question, starting with you, Tanya Woo, can you say something positive about the work of your opponent?
About the work. Okay, yes. So I think Councilmember Morales does great work when it comes to housing, and really excited to see you putting forth social housing and finding funding for that. I think that's amazing. And you know, I think also in terms of not only housing, but Councilmember Morales does great work when it comes to just, I guess, looking at transportation infrastructure and finding out what areas may need improvement. I appreciate that she is, I guess, really looking into these two major areas in our district.
Thank you. Feels good to get on a positive note. Councilmember Morales, same question.
Well, I think it's great that Tanya is participating and engaging with mutual aid. It was really important, particularly during the pandemic, that we take care of each other, that neighbors actually get out on the street and do that work. And you know, I think it's whether it's providing wound care or providing food or providing a connection or really just providing somebody to talk to, I think it's important work, and I think it's great that you did that.
Thank you. And on behalf of the South Seattle Emerald, I would like to thank both of you for joining us tonight, answering all of these questions. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for sending in all of those questions. Thank you to everyone who has supported the South Seattle Emerald. As Michael mentioned, our QR code is here if anyone would like to make additional donations. Shout out to our partners, Real Change, Ground Zero Radio, any partners that I forgot because I have no script in front of me. But thank you, and everybody get home safe.
Thank you.